The first bill on the calendar for today is House File 2446. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2446, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to state government, establishing a budget for the Department of Agriculture, the second engrossment.
I recognize the author, Representative Anderson, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The bill before us today, House File 2446, the Ag Finance Bill, to me represents a unique, first-of-a-kind bill here on the House chamber floor today. This spending bill comes out of what we know as our committee, new committee structure here in the House. We all know what that is. We have equal number of members in all committees, and we have committee chairs that run our committees. And despite that, I shouldn't say despite, but we still came up with a good, solid bill, the Ag bill here that you have before you today. You know, this might not have been the bill I would have brought forward had I been the only chair of the committee, and I suspect that Chair Hansen may have somewhat the same feeling that it might not be the strongest bill he could support either. But the point is, we had a good target thanks to our leadership, and we came together, we worked, and we compromised, and we came up with a good, solid bill. And I think a real key is that each of us on each side of the aisle have provisions in this bill that we feel are very important. They're strongly held positions by either side, and we have those positions in the bill, and that's why I think we have a bill today that we can all strongly support. This is a pro-farming, a pro-agriculture bill. It prioritizes farmers, both large and small. And although the ag budget is a pretty small piece of the overall state budget, this bill is going to do a lot of good for the ag industry here in the state of Minnesota. And before I go any further, Madam Speaker, I'd like to just say thanks to the great staff we had working on the committee here and on the bill this year. On our side of the aisle, to CA Mark Knisely. Mark, you're simply the best. That's all I can say. Researcher Luke LeBrun, thanks for your input and coming up with those research summaries for every meeting. Did a great job. To my CLA, Connie Edwards. Connie, I think you learned a lot about ag and farming this year. And also thanks for having that bottle of water ready every meeting if I needed that for our committees during the season, so thank you. Ken Savory and Megan Mullenbach, you were there with us all the way, even on weekends. You answered all of our questions, and as we put the bill together, had great help for us as we finished and put this bill together. So with that, Madam Speaker, I think I'll stop for a while and allow the other co-chair to speak and to talk about the bill as well. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Co-Chair Anderson. Co-Chair Anderson is correct that we coordinated very closely, except there was one thing we forgot to coordinate on, and that was who was going to thank the staff first. So I had it all written up here, Paul, and was going to start, but I want to make sure I maybe echo you and repeat a couple names. So I want to thank the committee staff, fiscal analyst Ken Savory, House research analyst Megan Mullenbach, committee administrators Peter Strohmeyer and Mark Knisely, committee legislative assistants Isabel Anderson, Leah Killian, Grace Johnson, and Connie Edwards, and our partisan researchers Sean Haydorn and Luke LeBrun. In addition to that, I want to thank the committee members. We had an unusual year, but I think we had good debate that allowed us to put together this bill. And I was thinking about risks and rewards. You know, when we talk about risks, it takes a risk to leave things behind. It takes a risk to reach out and do things that you have not done before. It takes a risk to run for office, but it also takes a risk to govern. And each of those risks, by taking those risks, we get the rewards of having a budget that I believe most, if not all of us, can support. Chair Anderson is correct. If we were writing the bill, it probably would be different. If you were writing the bill, it would probably be different. But we have things in here, and that is because we're able to have our leadership give us a positive target. And that positive target means investments. And those investments are not just protecting what we have, but looking on what we can do. How can we build a foundation and a future for Minnesota agriculture and for the people of Minnesota? So I just want to go through a couple things on the people-focused that we have added. The Agri and Farm to School Institution Program. Now, we're going to hear a little bit later on from members about some of the cuts coming from the federal level, but we're not able to refill all those cuts, but we are able to help out people by buying food from farmers for schools and for people who need it. So money into farmers' pockets to help people eat. Secondly, we also recognize the threat of avian influenza, and we recognize that jointly and the need for a strong Board of Animal Health. And we put money in so that there is protection for workers, whether the farmer, the farm worker, or the person who's processing the food that comes to us. Those protections will be important if we have to deal with the emergency of avian influenza. And then finally, we provide for a science-based, research-based, for the future, for a foundation. We know that there's a problem with PFAS in sewage sludge. We don't know how big it is. We don't know where it is. But we're trying to pull together the experts to look at the research on that. We want to look at the Olmsted County water quality work that's been done and see if that can be expanded. How is it working? Have an independent third-party evaluation. We've heard a lot about Forever Green, and we provide funding for that. But in addition to looking for new things, we also go back and look at old things like flax and some of the crops that were growing 100 years ago and see what they can be done in the future. And then finally, we do some research on prions and what the impacts might be for crops. Science, workers, and food for people coming from farmers, all of us working together to help out agriculture. We believe those are strong parts in the bill, and I know there will be additional debate. So again, I want to extend my thank you to Co-Chair Anderson in working to put this together.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill a third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2446.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Polk, Representative Gander.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of House File 2446 on behalf of the Agriculture Committee. And I would like to highlight a particularly impactful organization, AURI, or the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute. AURI helps fuel innovation in Minnesota's ag economy, exploring new crops, discovering new varieties, finding fresh uses for existing agricultural commodities. They partner with farmers, agribusinesses, and entrepreneurs to turn agricultural potential into economic growth. Their vision is bold. Through the clients they serve, AURI plans to generate $500 million in economic activity by 2026. That's the kind of forward-thinking work that helps our farmers stay competitive and our rural communities thrive. And if George Washington Carver could find 300 uses for peanuts, well, just imagine what we're still missing in Minnesota agriculture. At the beginning of the session, the partisan divide looked like it might be too wide to bridge. But thank you to the steady leadership of co-chairs Paul Anderson and Rick Hansen and the hard work of our staff and committee members, we've built a bill that truly serves our farmers, our food systems, and our future. I urge your support of HF2446. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Gottfried.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the most junior member of this assembly, I just want to say that I am learning quite a lot, and I learned quite a lot on the Agriculture Committee, and it was a joy to watch House File 2446 come together. I want to first start by saying that there is a lot to like on both sides of the aisle in this particular bill. And again, I want to thank our co-chairs, Co-Chair Anderson and Co-Chair Hansen on this particular bill. I think those on the other side of the aisle, and maybe everybody in the committee, knows that I'm not a farmer. But I did grow up with some of my close family friends being small farmers, and I could not help but look at this bill through their eyes, through that lens of seeing how this would impact them positively. So there are a couple of things that I want to highlight as broad buckets of really, really great things that exist within this bill. That is food and farmers, workers and consumers, and then as Representative Hansen mentioned, science. So what's in the bill pertaining to food and farmers? So the Minnesota Down Payment Assistance Grant offers up to $20,000 for qualified farmers purchasing their first farm. That is going to help new farmers enter the market. That is an incredible, incredible program. We mentioned now that there's local food purchasing assistance program that receives in next biennium $2 million, which would allow the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to award grants to applicants who would use this money for projects that buy local food, primarily from socially disadvantaged farmers, and distribute food at no cost to underserved communities throughout the state. Likewise, there's also a farm to school and early care program that receives $2 million, which allows, these programs promote and serve locally produced foods in schools and other child nutrition programs, and also encourages integration of nutrition education into classroom curriculum and hands-on learning. Now, these are critically important things at this particular time. You have two handouts in front of you right now. What these are letters from USDA cutting off funding that was already promised to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture for the local food for school program to the tune of $3.2 million, and the local food purchase assistance program to the tune of $4.7 million. These are cuts from the federal level coming down by the Trump administration. And so what I want to say is that this bill helps fill that gap. These programs are absolutely critical. And these appropriations are a stopgap. Let's be clear, our state will still hurt because of the USDA cuts, but these appropriations help, and I want to thank our co-chairs and other members of the committee for supporting programs that will put food on the table and help smaller food farmers weather this storm. Now, workers and consumers, this bill also provides a number of protections that will protect both workers and consumers in our state. $200,000 is appropriated for mental health support for farmers, ranchers, and other ag workers. That is critically important. Additionally, over the next biennium, this bill provides $1.7 million for additional meat and poultry inspection services and $1.5 million for county grants to support county agricultural inspectors. Both are critical funding for consumer protections at the state level as the FDA suspends quality control programs due to the Trump administration's cuts to the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, this bill also gives back $450,000 to grants to help livestock producers install measures to prevent transmission of the avian flu, another critical consumer protection. And lastly, the bill also appropriates, as Representative Hansen mentioned before, $4 million to the Agriculture Department to conduct avian flu testing in products before retail sale and in agricultural workers. This is something that was asked for and was very well supported by our labor friends in UFCW. Now, these avian flu-related appropriations are a way to defend Minnesotans from this, what could be a pandemic disease, as the federal administration fired 25% of its staff at the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, which helps to detect animal-borne disease, and 95% of the staff from the Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response, which is crucial to detecting and early prevention for communicable diseases like avian flu. So again, I would like to thank both of our co-chairs for putting provisions in this bill that will protect both consumers and workers within our state. Now, last, there's a great segue to science. I'm not going to reiterate the studies that are going to be conducted in here. I think Representative Hansen went over those well. But this research funding does come at a time when there are cuts to funding at the federal level. And I think we need to be proud of the work that we are doing to make sure that future policy in the agriculture sphere in this state is rooted in science. So I just want to say one last thank you to our co-chairs. Thank you for investing in a policy approach that is rooted in science. I want to thank committee members for the careful and considered approach to this bill and the dialogue that they gave to folks, to the provisions that are in it and those that are not. I especially want to thank Representative Nelson and Co-Chair Anderson for their dialogue surrounding Article 2 of this. I appreciate the dialogue that we had around that. Thank you. Lastly, I want to thank everyone in the committee for protecting and providing for Minnesotans in the agriculture industry and consumers in our state for our agricultural products. I am eager for the opportunity to continue learning, and I want to thank you for your time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Winona, Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For myself, as a farmer, fourth-generation family farmer who comes from a heritage of being good stewards of the land, while at the same time being a government official elected to defend the taxpayer, I often struggle with the payments that support agriculture. Today we have a bill before us that meets at that intersection. In my first 2 years as a legislator and farmer working on the Ag Committee, I was disheartened that I wasn't able to support the work that came out of the Ag Committee. Today we have a different opportunity in front of us. The bill before us might not be a perfect bill, but it's a very good example of the kind of compromises that will need to be made in an evenly split legislature. One of my duties here in St. Paul includes sitting on the Legislative Audit Commission. We've seen and exposed an infuriating amount of fraud as we worked on that committee. But there was one bright spot that was exposed as we worked and audited the different departments. That bright spot was the Department of Ag, where there was no fraud uncovered. Furthermore, the audit was the cleanest audit that we saw in my 3 years on that commission. I often speak about working together to bring both sides of the issue to the table. Members, that's what you have before you today. A reasonable compromise backed by a high-integrity department. And for those reasons, I encourage a green vote today. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here at the outset of many, many budget bills that we're going to hear, I think it's good to remember two fundamental facts about this sort of odd legislative session we're at. One is that not one of us in this room decided to campaign and knock on doors and make phone calls so that we could sit in a divided chamber. This is not something that excites us. This is not something that we got into this for. But that brings us to our second fact, and that is that we are merely servants of the people of Minnesota. And so when they ask us to do something, even something that perhaps is not something we enjoy, we follow through on it. And in this case, in this particular bill, in the ag space, I'm very proud of the work that our committee has done. Through a rough road, we've had disagreements, we've had very open disagreements, and yet we've come to a place and a bill that I think accurately reflects what the people of Minnesota sent us here to do. I'm very proud of a few particular things in this bill. Our work on food insecurity, increasing the down payment assistance for new farmers, increasing protections for workers in poultry and meat packing facilities, working on our comprehensive plan for bird flu, what has been done and discovered and what may happen in the future, funding our department into the next couple of years, and one thing very close to my heart is potentially giving us another tool in the toolbox to help with southeastern Minnesota water quality. It's a great program that my county, Olmsted County, is currently doing. And a study that the department is going to undertake that is in this bill is going to see if we can expand that to the surrounding counties. I'm proud of this bill. Not everything in here is something that I would do if I was just writing this ag bill or if we were in the majority, as many people have said, but this is a good bill, and I'd like to encourage our members to vote green on this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Pine, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members, because it's been said a few times, I'll say it one more time. This is a bill that has been put together and I think probably as close to a perfect bill as it could get. We've done a lot of work, had input from both sides, and we've been able to really come to a solution I think is a win-win, and just really coming together to have those conversations. And earlier today, thankfully, the rain held off, and we were able to have steak on a stick. And yes, I hope everybody got to enjoy some that wanted to partake. And as we look at some of the funding, there's funding for milk and meat processing plants, the inspecting of it and everything. Having that, it's a crucial part. And food brings us together. That's one thing that all of us have in common. We might have different preferences of what food we want, but that brings us together. And this bill in a lot of ways did bring us together. We had different ideas, and we were able to really come down and give us what we really wanted out of here. And I think some of the things that I was proud to work on was the wolf and elk depredation accounts, making sure we had the funding for that. And then the livestock investment grants, somewhat similar to the the farm down payments and other things, is ensuring that we're getting diversity in our farms and having the investment to be able to do so. And also another provision I'd worked on is for crop inputs, just clarifying a handling and not needing a higher certification for that is what is needed, but at the same time, making sure that everything is done safely around that. So to the co-chairs, thank you for your work on that, and to the staff and the other rest of the committee members, thank you for your input, and let's vote this green and send it on our way. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Roseau, Representative Burkle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'll keep my comments brief, but today I'm glad to stand up and support House File 2446. This ag bill really is a product of peace in the valley, so to speak, and I really think it's a bill we can support. Back in 2015, 10 years ago this week actually, my farm was one of the many that year that was the unfortunate victim of highly pathogenic influenza. That year we spent most of our summer depopulating barn, clean up, disinfect, and a lot has happened in those last 10 years since I went through this myself. Minnesota has become a leader nationwide when it comes to high path response, ramped up biosecurity plans. Our farms have really stepped up to the task, but really it's been the coordination throughout the poultry industry with, the Board of Animal Health orchestrating a solid, concerted effort with the Department of Ag and the Board of Animal Health in particular. And that's really the reason for the success we've had fighting back against this virus. So the importance of the increased funding for the Department of Ag and the Board of Animal Health, specifically the Ag Emergency Account, cannot be understated. These are the folks on the front lines of this battle with avian influenza in Minnesota. And our model and this collaboration between the Board of Animal Health and our industry partners leads the way nationally. We've become the model. And it's this kind of investment, and it's farmers making these innovations like turkey lasers, for instance, which you've probably heard some about, included in the Avian Influenza Mitigation Grant Program, that are putting those tools in our toolbox. And growers across the state are taking advantage of that to manage this high path avian influenza virus. So lastly, I want to highlight the increased funding to cover farm and livestock depredation. Our livestock producer costs, the costs related to wolf and elk depredation really increased, and both of those accounts are in jeopardy. It's especially important given those rising costs for our producers, who really have an extremely limited ability to manage the damages caused by increased wolf depredation and elk depredation. So with that, Madam Speaker, there are a number of important provisions in this bill, but I'll end my comments there, and I would urge members to vote green for this bill, which does a lot of really good things with a small amount of money. It's not chicken feed, it's in the big picture, but it really does a lot of good things for farmers that produce the food we eat in the state and across the state and the world, both large and small. So members, please vote green.
I recognize the member from Sibley, Representative Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker Damath and members. This bill secures adequate funding for contributors to the ag economy who are struggling with tight margins. Write that down. Tight profit margins. With a budget of less than 1% of the general fund, the bill prioritizes farmers along with the reduction of red tape, and that's always important. And margins are tight for producers as we have little to no control over the cost of input to produce our crops or people that have livestock. So I'm a fourth generation farmer, and my family farm grows corn and soybeans. And we have had our fair share of problems this past year. So you probably have heard in previous committees, last year we had too much rain, then not enough rain. We had high winds that laid down the crop, and then we had hail. And all these events, created a situation where it was probably one of the worst production years that we've ever had, that we can ever think of. And then now you're probably wondering, well, what do you mean by production? So let's just take, for example, corn. Let's just say on average, a year you average, for those of you that know ag, 180 bushels of corn per acre. Last year, we got 110. And that is significant when you're on tight margins. And we talk about all the problems that are happening at the federal government. I don't know how that will affect us. It hasn't affected us now. We're not particularly worried about it, but I am worried about the state of Minnesota and what's happening within our borders. With all the money that was spent 2 years ago, raising taxes and fees, and now we're facing a deficit. And we do face uncertain times, and that's just not for agriculture. That is across the state. And I get the privilege, and it is a privilege to be in agriculture and the privilege to pay the government. So if you remember last week, April 15th, the bills came due. And I just want to highlight, I am one farmer out of many, and I bet there are many, many in the same situation that we are in, wondering, how long can we hang on? So if you take just our farm income, everything that we made on the farm, and you take the taxes that we paid last week for state and for federal, and pretty soon in May, it's going to be at the county. Over 50% of what we made on our farm goes to taxes. And I hear about fair share, and I wonder, well, what is a fair share? And so as farmers that are in the same situation, you can see what happens. The farmers that aren't making their profit, well, what do we do with the land? Then it gets sold to somebody else who is considered a bigger farmer. You want lots of small farmers. That's what Minnesota is, small farms. And so I just want to highlight some of the struggles that we do face. But with this bill, this was a good committee. And we had some good conversations about how we're going to help our farmers, and that is important. The fact that we have done is that we can do a lot of good for many people with a relatively small amount of funds. A little goes a long way. And this bill will help agriculture across the state, and that's the important thing. Agriculture is so vital to our state and everything that it does, and so this bill is important, and I appreciate the work that all of us have done together, both sides of the aisle, to keep our small farmers going. And so I thank you for your time.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as we close on this bill and move towards the vote, I think it's important to note that agriculture is changing. And let's just talk and think about agriculture. The culture in agriculture are people. They're the people that are at the farms. They're the people who help the farms. They're people working at the farms, people who are helping process the food, people who serve the food, people who eat the food. All of that is part of the culture of agriculture. We all were participating in that today out on the lawn. And so, as many speakers have said earlier today, this is a relatively small budget and a relatively small increase, but it is an increase when other people are cutting. And that's a recognition for our state that we can invest in people. We invest in people by investing in food, in quality food, in preparation of that food. But as a former staff member at the Department of Agriculture, I also want to recognize the people who work there. And we haven't mentioned yet in the budget, we provide for the operating increase for those staff people who are working and help answer the questions for the farmers, answer the questions for the folks who are working with the farmers, provide the certifications and the licenses and the service that make our system, as has been mentioned, one of the best in the country. We want to continue those investments. This bill does that. I ask for your vote today to keep the people, the culture, and agriculture, keep those investments, and make our state work. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Madam Speaker and members, for the really positive things spoken today about agriculture, about farming, about the way of life it is for those of us who live on the farm. And if I could take just a second to acknowledge the members over here on the Ag Committee, on my side, Representative Jacob, Representative Harder, Burkle, Representative Lawrence, Representative Nelson. We're all farmers. We live this every day. We know what it's like. We know how good it can be and how challenging it could be. I mentioned in committee the last day, we had some bankers in the offices a couple of weeks back. And this banker told us that she's been working, it was a lady, she's been working with farmers ever since January when farmers started to work on their cash flows for the new year. And ever since that time, early January up until first part of April, all the farmers she had worked with, only one was able to show a positive cash flow. Only one. And we're going to put our crop in this year. Farmers are the eternal optimists. You know, there's an old saying, farmers are the only people that when we buy something, we buy it for retail. When we sell it for wholesale, and we pay the freight both ways. You know, the system seems to be a little bit, we take what the market gives us. And we're not saying the system should be fixed, but that's the way it is. And that's the way we've chosen to live our lives with our families and live in our farms and areas and do the best we can. Yeah, farming is changing. I totally agree with that, admit to that. But yet, I've said for a long time here that Minnesota is an agricultural powerhouse. I'm proud to be from Minnesota, proud to be a farmer here in Minnesota. And if I could just take a second to run down some of the numbers before we vote on this bill. And these are from the year 2023. And in that year, in that season, Minnesota produced over $23 billion, that's with a B, $billion worth of ag crops and livestock, a huge economic driver in the state. In the state, we have 25.4 million acres of cropland. That's about half the total land area in Minnesota. We have about 67,000 farms in Minnesota. The average farm size is about 379 acres. Minnesota ranks in the top 10 nationally in more than 20 agricultural products. If I could run down a few of them. Number one, Minnesota, number one in sugar beets, turkeys raised and green peas, number two in hogs, sweet corn processing. We're third in the nation in soybean production, sunflowers, canola, dry beans, and oats. We're fourth in corn production. Number 6 in animal meats and cheese. Number 7 in wheat, barley, and honey. We are 8th in the nation in dairy milk production, in snap beans, and we are 10th in potato production in America. Minnesota's agricultural industries contribute over 15% or more of our total economic activity in the state of Minnesota, and we support over 10% of all the jobs in Minnesota. So ag is a tremendous economic driver of the state. It impacts all of us, even if you live wherever in the state or if you're on a farm, it's a big driver in all of our lives. So this bill, Madam Speaker, maintains our agricultural and food industries. It makes them even more competitive here in this country. And what could be more fitting today? We had steak on a stick, more fitting than to vote green on the ag bill today. So members, I would encourage a green vote, and thank you all.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Swazinski.
Swazinski, aye.
Swazinski votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to.